Say Mount Vernon, Monticello, Gettysburg, and Independence Hall, and each of those names immediately connects us to a piece of the American story. But say Edmund Pettus Bridge, 16th Street Baptist Church, the Lorraine Motel, or Little Rock Central High School, and the image and heroic deeds which happened there may not come as easily. Sadly, too many of us know the story of our country in fragments. For nearly a quarter of a century, tonight's guest has been on a mission to fix that. Stay with us. Well, Dr. Todd Allen of Messiah University has been opening eyes and hearts to a still very recent chapter of American history, the Civil Rights Movement. And he's been doing it to remind riders on his bus trips below the Mason-Dixon line of the way ordinary Christians, pastors, lay leaders followed the simple commands of Christ: to love our enemies, to bless and even do good, and pray for those who despise and abuse us. Values of an upside-down kingdom were the driving force behind the movement. He's helping participants experience faith in action. Dr. Allen is joining us today from Harrisburg. Welcome to State of Independence, Dr. Allen. Tell us where this idea for these wonderful civil rights bus trips originated.
Sure. Well, good to be with you, Joe, and thank you for this opportunity. I am originally from Western Pennsylvania, and child of the 80s, and I grew up learning this history in high school. And I thought every kid had that opportunity, and it wasn't until I went to college that I realized what a unique opportunity that was. Throughout my college years, I guess I worried my friends to death, asking them, hey, did you know this? Have you heard about this? And so about 25, 26 years ago, a friend from college reached out and says he wants to, go to some of these sites. Could I recommend something that they could read? And I gave him some book suggestions, and I didn't think anything more about it. And then about a month before his trip, he says, you're going with me, right? And I said, no, that's okay. And he said, what do you mean that's okay? And I was like, honestly, at that time, I had thought, that I had read a few books. I had been to a few places. I had seen Eyes on the Prize. I thought I knew it all. And fortunately, he persisted that, I joined him. And I went on that trip 25 years ago, and I've been taking people on these journeys ever since.
Wow. So where in Western PA are you from?
A little place called Beaver Falls, just north of Pittsburgh.
Oh yeah, I've heard of it. I've heard of Beaver. It's a great area of the state, and wonderful. And so, did you know when you were a kid that you were going to become, that you were going to get your doctorate, that you were going to be, an administrator, on the college level? I mean, most kids. Some people probably think your first name is Doctor, that your parents named you Doctor, Dr. Allen. But did you aspire to all that when you were a kid growing up in Beaver Falls?
Certainly not at all. Yeah. I'm one of 6 kids. I'm number 3. I have
Same
2
here.
older brothers.
I'm one of 6, and I'm 3 also.
Oh, there you go.
You're
there you go.
Man.
As I like to say, we're the glue and we're the standard then
Yes.
that holds our families together. But my 2 older brothers followed my father into the military. And all I knew about the military was you get up early and you get yelled at. And neither one of those things worked well for me. And so I thought, well, what am I going to do after high school? And so I chose college, actually chose a career or major in broadcasting. And I thought that that's what I would be doing with the rest of my life. But had a great undergraduate experience, so much so that I decided to stay and remain working in higher ed. But even there, never could have imagined going on to teaching and doing administrative work. It's just one of those, I tell people to this day, the importance of being faithful in the moment, having some goals. But I tell people, don't be so fixed in your goals that there's no room for the spirit to move. And so, I had some great mentors who saw things in me along my journey that I didn't see and encouraged me to, head down this path that led to a doctorate and to now working in senior administration. And so, one of the things that I will forever be grateful for that. And so I use my opportunity in the academy to continue to then pay that forward and to pour into the lives of others.
That's very, very wonderful. That's just a wonderful testimony. And so, getting back to the civil rights rides, were you already working on the college level as a senior administrator when your persistent friend said, "Well, you're coming with me on this tour"?
No, actually, I was still very early in my higher ed career. I believe I was teaching at that point. That was primarily my responsibility. But I mentioned, learning this history in high school. And so when I came back from that very first trip with my friend, one of the people I told about it was this former high school history teacher I had. And she had just retired, and she said, "You should plan a trip." And I tell people it's amazing what you can do when you don't know what you don't know. Because had I known the work that it requires to do something like this, I may have been too intimidated. But she was on that very first trip that I planned.
And where'd you go? Where'd you all go on that first trip?
Yeah, that very first one, it was probably about 5 days. The bulk of it would have been in Atlanta, and then Montgomery, Selma, and Birmingham in Alabama. Because again, coming from the north, you spend a few days getting south and a few days getting back to the north. But of all of those experiences, what I found to be the most powerful were even the places like Atlanta that I had been. I had not been there with the people who made that history happen. I mean, I tell people I can still remember the very first time I walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It was a day kind of like today. It was raining, and I said, in some ways, trying to be macho. I said I was glad it was raining. I said because you couldn't tell that I was crying. Because your mind just goes back to that footage from Bloody Sunday. And I just thinking about what John Lewis and others would have seen that day, and rather than turn in fear, they continue to march forward in faith. And
we know what happened.
That courage.
The courage that it took, because they marched right into a beating. I mean, I don't know how many of us would willingly walk into a situation where we knew that we were probably going to be beaten by anybody, maybe even to the point of, within an inch or two of our lives. That's what happened that day on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And I'm sure that's why I'm guessing it was so moving for you to cross that same bridge as well, as you remembered what had happened there.
Just the power of these places and of these spaces. And then, like I said, then to have been blessed, when do you take a history class in school, and then grow up to meet the people that you studied? And then now in this stage, being able to take my current college students and place them, in the presence of these heroes and sheroes of the movement. For the young people and the not so young people that get this opportunity, I think one of the things that's so powerful for them is to realize that these people that we're studying were their age and younger at the time that they chose to get involved in the movement. And it really does let you know that, this was a story, this was a movement of ordinary people who did extraordinary things, and that each one of us indeed are ordinary people. But, we're called upon, to do what's right.
Yeah.
They didn't get involved because, they were seeking fame or attention. They saw something wrong and they wanted to make it right.
Yeah, I think the story of Dr. King getting involved with the Montgomery bus boycott back in 1955, I think it was. And, he was a young guy. He was still in his 20s.
Yeah.
His late 20s, and I'm sure he wasn't thinking to himself, I'm going to get famous from this. I'm going to be known around the world. Someday when I'm gone, there'll be holidays named for me. I mean, at that point in 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama, I'm sure that, and I understand that too. The other ministers figured, well, he was the newest guy in town and the youngest, so let him be the face of the thing, because the other ones didn't want to get in trouble. He said, you go ahead, you be the head of it. And so
Well, yeah, that's the beauty. Is the more you dig into these stories, you realize the complexity of the historical narrative, and just the ways in which it is reflective of decisions that you and I make today. We're not thinking about how this is going to get remembered 15, 20 years down the line. You're trying to address a matter at this particular time. And yeah, whether it's Dr. King rising to leadership, or Mrs. Parks refusing to give up her seat on a bus. It's these ordinary acts of courage that have transformed a nation, and that's one of the same messages that is true today.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. Of course, if we can look into the future, and if somebody told you in the future that there'll be a holiday for Dr. Todd Allen, you might get scared because you say, well, what am I going to do that's going to cause that? What's going to happen to me? They'll have a holiday named for me.
As I said a moment ago, it's amazing what you can do when you don't know what you don't know.
That's exactly right. So did you meet, I know Andrew Young is still alive.
Yes.
And he was right there. He was one of the chief lieutenants for Dr. King. He was he was a little bit younger than him, but still kind of a contemporary. And he's in his 90s now, but still very much alive. I don't know so when you go to Atlanta, did you see where the SCLC was located and where Ebenezer Baptist Church? Our own Jeff Coleman has been to Ebenezer, where Dr. King co-pastored with his father. But do you take your students to Ebenezer Baptist Church, or?
Oh, yes. Yeah. You have to go by Ebenezer, and if you're there on a Sunday, you've got to enter for worship. Obviously, there at Ebenezer also is the Martin Luther King Center. We've been blessed down through the years to meet again some of those heroes and sheroes when we've been in Atlanta. Unfortunately, many of those that we've met with down through the years are no longer with us. But I just, my heart smiles when I think about the time we spent with, Mrs. Juanita Abernathy, widow of Reverend Abernathy, or Reverend C.T. Vivian, or Congressman John Lewis. We were blessed to be with him on a few occasions. And then, most recently, a gentleman by the name of Charles Person, who was the youngest rider on the original Freedom Rides in 1961. He was an 18-year-old first-year college student at Morehouse. Unfortunately, Mr. Person, passed away earlier this year. But again, the stories and the wisdom that all of those people shared with us down through the years is just memories that we'll always treasure.
Yeah, have any of your students been? Do you feel that they're transformed by what they see, by having a chance to actually see what happened and where it happened, to see the places? Is that at all transformative for your students?
Oh, I tell you, as soon as you said that, my mind thought to a trip that I took with students in the summer of 2017. And if you would have asked them prior to that trip to name a song from the civil rights movement, they might have been able to identify "We Shall Overcome," but they probably wouldn't have been able to sing too much of it. Well, they go on that trip and they meet Miss Rutha Harris, who's one of the original SNCC freedom singers down in Albany, Georgia. And she sits them down in the pews and she begins to teach them songs of the movement. And fast forward then to later that fall, we have the incident that occurs in Charlottesville, where unfortunately a young woman's life was taken. Well, these same students, they're now back on campus and they decide that they want to hold a vigil in a memory of this woman and of this moment. And as we're walking across or marching across campus, they decide that they want to lead their peers in freedom songs. And so these 18 to 22-year-old students who didn't know any freedom songs before that summer are leading their peers in freedom songs. But then they also say before they start leading, these young people, they're like, put your phones away. We don't want anybody recording anything. We want you to be present in the moment. And I couldn't help but pull my phone out and record it because I had to send it to Rutha and said, Rutha, you will not believe this. These young people who just 2 months ago couldn't have identified a freedom song are now leading their peers in these songs of the movement. And that's just one example of that lasting impact.
Yeah, that's amazing. What a blessing. The racial divide has yet to be bridged in terms of people understanding what happened and knowing the actual places where so much of this took place. What do you think about that? I mean, even among the students that you take to see it, are there predominantly just black students and brown students that want to see it, or do you find that there are white students as well that are interested and that go on the trips?
Oh yeah, no. Every trip that I take, represents a broad diversity of people. But it's interesting that you raised that because in the 24 years I've been doing it, I can assure you, at some point early on in the journey, there will be a person, it doesn't matter the age, but white, who will come up alongside me, and they'll tell me how impactful the trip has been, even though it might still be the first day. And I kind of know where the conversation's going. And then they'll say, my fill in the blank, my father, my uncle, my grandmother told me, you don't want to go on that. That's got nothing to do with you. In fact, they're just going to tell you how bad white people are. And they said, then, I came on this trip. And first of all, that's not the tone or tenor of the experience. They said, but then I began to learn stories. I learned about people like Viola Liuzzo, white woman from Detroit who didn't know anybody in Selma, Alabama, but saw what happened on Bloody Sunday and came to be part of that movement, and for her involvement was assassinated, right? Or they learn about a Reverend Robert Gretz, white pastor who went south to Montgomery, pastored an all-black Lutheran congregation. When his church sent him to Alabama, they said, don't go down there starting any trouble. Well, we know that Mrs. Parks, refused to give up a seat, and they wanted, pastors to make an announcement to their churches to stay off the buses for a day. Well, so Gretz says, well, before he made that announcement, he wanted to confirm the facts. And so he's, calls his good friend and next door neighbor to get the details. And towards the end of the call, he says, well, do you know who it was that, was arrested? And he says, there's this pause. And the voice says, it was me, his good friend and next door neighbor, Rosa Parks. And so Gretz says he knows at that point that he's going to get involved. And he used to say in later years, he said, when, some people said, well, didn't you violate the order that your church gave you? And he said, well, the way we looked at it was the church told us don't go down there and start any trouble. They didn't tell us we couldn't join the trouble.
Wonderful. Well, my guest today is Dr. Todd Allen, a vice president at Messiah University. He's taken hundreds on bus trips to visit the historic scenes of the civil rights movement, even meeting many of the key figures of the era. It's having a profound impact on so many. And we'll be right back.
Share what you've learned on today's program by first connecting with Joe directly on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Get started at joewatkins.net.
Welcome back to State of Independence. My special guest for the full program is Dr. Todd Allen of Messiah University. And for nearly a quarter of a century, he's been leading a civil rights bus trip like no other. Dr. Allen, why do you do it and why do you care?
Well, I am a student of history. I care because I couldn't do what I'm doing today, be where I am without this generation, these generations that came before that opened doors for me. And it's a reminder of the doors that still, need to be opened for those coming behind me. I tell people that this is American history that has shaped world history. It's not that long ago. And, I often say, if you don't know who said something, say Mark Twain. And so, Mark Twain said, history may not repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And I think we see a lot of rhyming in our current historical moment. Now, that on the one hand can cause some people to give in to despair, saying, well, if, here we are in 2025, if this didn't get solved 50, 60 years ago, why do we keep trying? That's one approach. But the other approach that I take is the wisdom that I take from these veterans, that freedom's a constant struggle. That, I started from a different starting point because of the work that they did and that they did not give up. And so who am I when I think things are tough to want to quit?
That's wonderfully said. When I worked in the White House, I spoke at West Point, and one of the professors at West Point gave me a poster that he had made, and it was a poster of the 4 earliest black college graduates of West Point. And in each case, those men had undergone such hardship, each of them enduring what they called the silent treatment, which meant that nobody spoke to you unless they were giving you an order. But outside of orders, nobody would say, hi, good morning, how are you doing, how's your family, none of that for 4 years, for the whole time they were there. And so I hung that poster on my wall eventually because I wanted to just remember how fortunate I was to not have when I considered the challenges of the people who had going before me, it makes me enormously grateful for the life I live. And also makes me realize the work I have to do as well, to make this place a better place, to be used by God, by the Lord, to show what the love of Christ is to the people around me, even in the 21st century. What civil rights leaders had the biggest impact on you?
Oh, wow. Just hearing you share that story there about West Point almost sounds descriptive of my office, because I keep myself surrounded by images of these men and women who made a difference. For me, they are my great cloud of witnesses, right? That remind me to keep pressing on, even when it seems like all is lost. It's almost like asking a parent, who's your favorite child. It's hard to single out. I mean, they have each poured into me in so many different ways. I know, like I said, growing up, learning about these people, what a difference it made for me. I have a son who's 25 now. He grew up having these people at his dinner table. And I can see the way in which he carries himself, the difference that's made for him. It will all depend. If there's a day when I need to hear a good, encouraging song, I might call Miss Harris, Rutha Harris, and I say she's one of those people you don't mind when you don't get her because she sings on her voicemail, right?
Yeah.
Or I might be wrestling with an educational question or matter, and so to contact Dr. Minnie Jean Brown, Tricky, one of the Little Rock Nine. This year is the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, and so I think about persons like Joanne Bland and Linda Lowry, who were children. They were 14 and 11 on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, not even old enough to vote, when they were beaten for that right to vote. Linda, the youngest to march the entire Selma to Montgomery march, she celebrated her 15th birthday, the second day of the march. And so, when I hear people say, voting doesn't matter, or that they're not registered to vote, or they don't even know who's running for what, it is the ultimate disrespect to the legacy and to the sacrifice of those who've gone before us.
So well said. Thank you so much, Dr. Allen. Just really, really appreciate you.
Thank you. Again, appreciate this opportunity to share, I don't even call it a project, but just to share a chapter of history that has changed my life and hopefully will continue to impact lives for generations to come.
Amen. Yeah, it's been such a pleasure getting to know Dr. Allen. I'm so grateful for what he does and what he's doing to help fill in the blank pages of America's story. It's such an important mission. We'll be right back with our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
And now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
Well, you touched on something I thought profound, which is that these historic sites, like the birthplace of Dr. King, and some of these other places through Montgomery and Birmingham, they are designated as National Historic Sites or maintained by private organizations. But you do notice that the racial makeup of the people who are visiting them are predominantly African American. And the idea that the American story is segmented by, well, these are the Scotch-Irish Presbyterians, and these are the Asians, and these are the African Americans, is silly, because it's our collective story, and everything that has happened in periods of history do have an impact on the way that we live and how we see America, how we see our country, and you have to see it through more than your own particular ethnicity.
Yeah.
And I think that is why what Dr. Allen is doing is so significant, which is inviting people into, oh, by the way, turn the page, there's another chapter. Don't rip out any of the pages of the past, but go ahead and include the full story.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. I like the way he said it. Students have been transformed. Like his students went down there and heard the songs by Rutha Harris, and then they chose themselves to sing those songs on their campus.
Yeah, music is something that is still so segmented. I'm going to say it's segregated because people are able to dip into any musical genre on your phone that you want to listen to from any period. So you can travel, do time travel easily through music. But the genre does, I think, help you understand when people are singing with such emotion, gospel music in particular, soul music, all the music that came out of the freedom songs that came out of that movement do help animate the places that you see. In the same way, if you're visiting Mount Vernon, a harpsichord brings that place to life. Well, so does Nina Simone, so does some of these other great singers. So I'm so glad he's doing it.
Yeah, me too. And you've been down to Ebenezer. And
yeah,
Atlanta.
I've been all over the South, and I wander into places and don't realize the history I'm standing on.
Well, Dr. Todd Allen grew up in the shadow of a generation of world-changing Christians, but his challenge to us tonight is to make sure that great deeds don't end with them. Look around. There are plenty of evils to challenge and wrongs to right. And if you do it God's way, in God's way, and in His strength, it's impossible to fail. Tell me how this program with Dr. Todd Allen spoke to you tonight. Wasn't he wonderful? Send me a comment in the comment box at joewatkins.org. I'll be sure to respond. From America's very first capital, Philadelphia, I'm Joe Watkins. For Jeff Coleman and the entire team behind the cameras at Lighthouse TV, thanks so much for watching. God willing, I'll see you next time.